on t-shirts soon.
Before we get started, Steve, would you share that story with them that you shared with me about the guy at the door and how the Spirit just taught you that lesson? You know what I'm talking about?
I know.
Would you share that with everybody?
Sure. About 3 weeks ago, Nick and I are standing at the door, and folks are walking in, and a couple comes up, and the first thing he says was, well, I'm not sure I'm dressed appropriate. He was in jeans. I had, that Sunday, I had a suit on, but no tie. But I had a nice suit that matched. And Nick, of course, is kind of dressed like Nick is now. He looked
This is dressed up for him.
Yeah.
To the nines right
So anyway, when he said that, it just was like, right in me, like, why are you dressing this way, Steve?
Yeah.
When you know it'd be good to dress down a little bit and make people more comfortable. So God just used that and do that to me.
That's right.
And just get me right straight now.
That's right.
There we go.
He shared that story.
That's awesome.
He shared that story with me, and I thought, you know, when the Holy Spirit teaches you something, it's a lesson you never forget.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think we've all had that nudge the Holy Spirit gave us that sometimes we ignore, and then we get the tap on the shoulder, and when we don't listen to that, it's the 2x4 upside the head.
Oh my gosh.
So I try to learn to listen to the nudge. It's a whole lot better than the tap and the 2x4.
There you go.
So let's open in prayer, and then we'll jump in. Lord, I thank you so much for who you are and what you want to do. God, we confess right now we need you desperately. We are fallen people, and we're proclaiming your great news. And sometimes, God, because we're so messed up and messy, it can be confusing for the people that are listening. And God, we just ask that your Spirit would so infuse each one of us, that you would like push out the manure in our lives and and sometimes not just the sin, God, but sometimes it's just those fleshly things of wanting to be cool, wanting to be younger, wanting to be older, wanting to be bigger, wanting to be on TV, wanting to be approved and appreciated, and whatever it is, God. It's the flesh. And God, we humbly come before you as a family right now, Lord. We ask that you would continue to crucify our flesh. Lord, we want you to be lifted high in each one of our churches and not ourselves. We want you to be glorified and people to be whispered all over town, not about Revolution or River or Bridge or Crossroads, but be whispered all over town. Did you see what Jesus did? That's right. Did you see how Jesus moved in the life of that church? Did you see how Jesus is feeding the poor on the west side? Did you see how Jesus is crushing the darkness in that neighborhood? So Lord, protect us from needing titles, from needing names. And instead, Lord, let us be, as you said, the greatest servants, so that people may not know who we are 20 years from now, but they'll know who you are. Pray that in Jesus' name. Amen. Rick, you want to tell us what we got coming up?
Sure. Coming attractions to CPCN. August 15th, we'll be discussing fostering and adoption. We have a panel discussion helping lead that. For some of you, that's a very personal topic. For others, it may not be something you thought about. But if we're going to plant churches and reach the least of these, then some of those kids in our communities count. So that'll be a chance for you to hear how to do that, how to get involved with that. September, we're talking about multi-site pros and cons. We've had some of our churches that have gone multi-site and had it go well. We've had some that have crashed and burned, and some that have tried it, learned, and done it better the second time through. So we'll be talking about those who are looking at multi-site ministry, some of the pros and cons in that one. And then November, Steve mentioned this last time, but I'm going to push it now. We've got a group coming in called Fight the New Drug. It is a pornography discussion. They're going to be doing a couple of presentations in local schools, as well as talking to us here about how to lead folks out of that darkness. Statistics are just stunning, and how many folks are involved in that. I know several of us have talked through that. Was part of our past that God has set us free from. These folks are coming into that presentation in November. make sure you're here for that one in November. Book it. Bring your youth leaders as well. Just pack the place. We want to hear what's going on and how we can, with the gospel, lead folks out of that darkness into light. One last commercial from my side of things. Exponential's coming up in March. We've booked tickets as a network. We are down under 30 available. Just because you went last year doesn't mean I have you on the 2020 list. You got to tell me, yes, we're coming, and here's how many tickets we need. Reminder through the network, 2 tickets per each church are provided, along with the travel stipend. If you want more than that, it's $99 a person for other folks that want to go. First come, first serve. When I run out, we'll call and see if we can get more, but if we can't, sorry.
Awesome. And just so you know, on that Fight a New Drug, that's a group we're bringing in. Is it from Atlanta? Is that where they're driving up from, or is it Nashville?
The groups, they're all over the place.
They're all over. And,
Yep.
and so we're sinking a chunk of money into that. Bring other pastors with you. What we've been trying to do, if you haven't noticed, is at least once a quarter we're trying to bring somebody in from the outside. And so for those that may be new, about like today, we're going to learn from each other. Last week we learned from each other. And then next week, hopefully, we're bringing somebody in from the outside. Then we Fight the New Drug, we'll bring them in from the outside. So if you're new, our goal is training. We want to train and equip you so that you have the tools that you need to be a healthy, reproducing church. Okay? So today, I'll turn it over to Josh. Josh is at Revolution in Crossville. Go ahead, introduce your guy.
My name's Josh. I'm the pastor of Revolution in Crossville, and I'm going to introduce this guy to you. But before, I just want to give you, by way of preface, just our church's story and what we went through with groups real quick, I promise. Okay, so we started 6 years ago, the first weekend in August. And our church skyrocketed really, really fast to like 300, 350 people. And we couldn't get over that hump. We sat at that hump for we were just plateaued for like 2 years. And Steve came and preached for me one time. It was probably 2 or 3 years ago, if you remember that. We were eating afterward at a Mexican restaurant. And I said, what do you see that's missing? And his words were, I don't see people coming in the doors that want to see each other. They're coming in and going to church and leaving immediately. Nobody is connected. And so right then we started praying. And have y'all ever done small groups or Sunday school or anything? It's maddening, right? Because people don't want to get involved. Your leaders are real shady. So we started praying. We started praying. Let's be real. Yeah. Okay? We're going to be real with you guys today. That's how we roll. So Jeff's going to be real with you too. So we started praying about what God would do, and we tried everything, and we think we got the right person to lead it up, but they were horrible, or they flamed out after 3 months, because it's really one of the hardest ministries in the whole church. And then Geoff retired from UPS. How long did you work there? You're probably going to say this, but 30 years at UPS, and we had that in common, and so we connected instantly. And he moved up to Crossville and retired.
You worked 30 years at UPS?
No, I worked like 7. He worked. We had in common the UPS thing, and so we connected over that. And so number one, I would just tell you, when it comes to groups, you can bang your head against the wall so much, and a lot of times in the church, we think the answer is, if I had more money, I could hire somebody good to do this. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You don't need money for God to send you somebody really, really good. Yeah. Because God sent Geoff, and in little over 2 years, right, He has used Geoff to absolutely crush it. One of my gifts is evangelism. So our church was really good at getting people to fill the card out and get baptized. But then 3 to 6 months later, we'd look around and go, where'd they go? We have no idea. Sound familiar? Anybody in here? Yeah. That's why you church plant, right? You live to reach people for Jesus. You don't live to create spreadsheets and all that other crap that we don't do. We don't want to do that. We're preachers, right? And so Geoff came in, and God can send you a Geoff. That would be my encouragement to you guys, is God will send you a Geoff. If you start praying and fasting, He'll send a Geoff. And now we've got 471 people in groups, right? Is that correct? Oh, wow. And the church, I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you, that was the missing element for us. Mm-hmm. We jumped to 500 or 600 people. And it's not about the numbers, it's about the fact that we are discipling more people, mm-hmm. and more people are meeting Jesus. And even more important than that, it's not just that, you know how it is in the church, we baptize them and then we count them as a number and we're done. People are growing. People are really growing. They're being called to ministry. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And it really spurred off of that. So no matter the size of your church, again, the numbers don't matter. If you want to disciple more people, if you want to close the back door, so to speak, you've got to find a Geoff. He's going to tell you all the ins and outs that I don't really know a whole lot about. He's really good at, but God can absolutely send you a Geoff. If you'll pray about it and you'll fast about it, He'll send him. So without further ado, here's Geoff. Geoff.
Yeah, that is Geoff with a G. Geoff, like the giraffe at Toys R Us. Spelled the same way. But I was born first. He took it from me. My parents did have a sense of humor. They knew it was something people would mispronounce my whole life. But that's fine. First, right off the bat, I have to say it's a privilege to be here to speak to y'all today. I want to thank Rick and Steve and Josh for giving me the invite to be here. And I wasn't planning on sharing this, but I want to, right from the beginning, to show you how God works. I started off this week, we had a leaders, our group's leaders picnic on Saturday. It was awesome. We had a great time. I was able to beat Brandon at cornhole a few times when he thought he was going to win. And then Sunday was a great day at church. Josh started a series on Jesus and money. Well, there's one of your favorite topics to bring to your congregation anytime you mention money. But it was awesome, and it's a 4-week series. And God's going to do amazing things. The timing of it's perfect. Monday morning, woke up. My wife is trying to pass a kidney stone. Even as I'm here, she's trying to pass a kidney stone. Yesterday, I was leaving the house to go to staff meeting. I got a call from my dad. They were taking him into emergency surgery this morning because he went to the urologist and they found a stone that was big enough it was blocking his whole ureter, or he couldn't pass any urine. And he's 4 hours away, and this was this morning. He went into surgery at 6:30 this morning, or had to be there. About a half hour ago, I got a text from my sister. They went in because they were going to drill a hole through the stone just to let urine pass through. He was in so much pain. They went in to operate. The stone was gone. There was just some swollen tissue pressing against his prostate. They were able to fix it. But you know what? God, and I was studying this week in Philippians 4, where Paul's talking about the peace of God. And he tells in 4:6, he says, don't worry about things, because God's got it. Take your petitions and your concerns and your cares to him. And when you do that, he provides that peace that passes understanding. And he doesn't provide that peace so we understand everything finally. He provides that peace so that no matter what's going on, we are in a state where we're calm and reliant on him, that he's got things. And it's that peace that guards our hearts and our minds, our hearts, our emotions, our minds, our thoughts. He guards those when we rest in that peace. And I had to get to that place yesterday because I wanted so bad to be there with my dad. And I wanted so bad to be there for my wife. And this was coming up this morning. And God said, rest, just rest. And he worked it out.
Amen.
It wasn't anything that I could do, and he took it. But it is an honor to be here. I did have a rough night last night, I have to admit. I downloaded this thing on my phone called Face App. Anybody heard of it? It's the latest trend in social media. So I downloaded the app, took a picture of myself. That you got to do, I went to the bottom where it says age, and I pressed old because I want to see what I'm going to look like when I'm older. And this red screen flashed up in black letters. It says, it's obvious this photo has already been filtered. Please choose another photo. All right. Okay. So I thought, well, that's fine. I'll go to the young one. I pressed the young, and it said, we are not magicians. We are just an app. So, but here's what I think is going to happen. Everybody's doing it. And I think within a few days, maybe a couple weeks, we're going to get ads on our social media and emails from Botox, because I think they're behind this whole thing, because it just adds wrinkles to you.
That's awesome.
So anyway, that being said, I am here to talk to you this morning about groups, because we found in our church that groups was the missing link to close that back door to the church. We just can trend that people are forming little families within the church now, within the groups, that cause them to stay and linger and talk and socialize with each other. And I wanted to bring you something this morning because I've known for a while this was supposed to happen in April, and it was the Thursday before Easter. So wisely, the leadership of CPCN decided to cancel that one because we were all knee deep in Easter plans, and it would have been a struggle. So I've had a while to plan this, and I've prayed to God. I said, God, just hit me with some holy revelation that I can pass on to these people this morning. Like, read this book and do these 3 steps, and you're going to have a thriving ministry in small groups. It didn't happen. He didn't give me those 3 steps, but the reason is we're all from different areas. And each one of those areas has different cultures. I've heard the word this morning already, culture. And within those cultures, there's dynamics that are unique to those cultures. Say, for instance, Crossville. We have an area north of the city called Fairfield Glade. And it's new, fairly new. I would say that most of the people that live there, I might be wrong, but most people that live there are not from Crossville. They're transplants that have come in from other states. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but there's money in Fairfield Glade. It's a different culture. Then you have the city of Crossville and the surrounding area, and I would venture to say that most of the people in that area have either lived in Crossville a long time or they were born and raised in Crossville. I've not heard of anyone living in Crossville and retiring and moving to Fairfield Glade. It's 2 different cultures. And we have a mix of both of those cultures in our church. I don't know if it's half and half, but there's both. And if we just targeted one of those cultures, we would eliminate the other. They wouldn't come. So we've had to find out how we can intermingle those cultures and still make it work. And the thing is with culture, to understand a culture, you have to know your people. You have to know the people that are in that culture to understand the culture. And if you don't know people, you won't grow people. You have to take the time and invest in your people to know them. That's one of my key points. If you want to write it down, that's fine. I only have 3 of them. So that's one of the 3. You have to know people to grow people. And all I can really do this morning, I'm not here to try to sell you a small groups program. I'm not here to tell you that you're doing it wrong. All I'm here to do is share with you what God has done and what He is doing in our groups at Revolution Church. And like Steve always says, eat the meat and spit out the bones. Please clean up after yourself after you spit out the bones. But I'm privileged to work on the team that we have at Revolution Church. I really believe we're close enough that any of us would take a bullet for each other. It's a team that works together no matter what needs to be done. It's not like, well, I'm doing my stuff first, and if I have anything left, I'll help you out. Mm-hmm. It's where the need is. That's where we are. It's almost like a magnetic draw to where the need is. That's where we go, and we help each other out. And we just did our Revy Awards a couple weeks ago at our all-staff meeting. It's where the staff and their spouses come. We had a picnic type thing at Josh and Brooke's house, and we give out awards. And Josh got the Michael Scott World's Best Boss Award. And honestly, I don't know if I would have come out of retirement to work for anybody else but Josh Cardwell. He pushes us, he challenges us, but he's not like, listen, this is the way you're going to do it. He's like, if it were me, this is how I would do it. And he approaches things that way. He makes us write down our goals. And we're never like this. We're never just standing. If we're not in this motion, stepping forward or stepping up, we're in the wrong place. Right. We're constantly moving forward. Because if we're just standing still, we're not growing. Yeah. And our thing is, there's people in Cumberland County that we want to reach for Jesus, and our mission isn't over until everybody in Cumberland County is saved. Mm-hmm. So we are constantly moving forward. And he's giving us creative ideas and pushing us forward, and it's an amazing thing to work at Rev Church. So that being said, I wanted to give you a little bit of backstory about me, just so you understand, not to brag on myself, but just so you understand where I came from. and the process that God put me through to get me where I am. Like Josh said, I did work 30 years at UPS in Tampa, Florida. I was driving around in a little brown truck wearing a brown uniform in 95-degree heat. That's why I still want to throat punch somebody up here when they complain about the heat. That is heat.
Lived 10 years down in Tampa.
Yeah, so you know it.
Yeah.
And there were so many times that I wanted to walk away from UPS, and it wasn't the work itself. It was the crap I had. Oh, can I say crap?
He did.
All right. It's the crap. It's the crap I had to go through to get the job done. It wasn't the work itself. But what I found out, and this is my number 2 point, God was preparing me for where He knew I was going, not preparing me for where I thought I was going. He knew what was coming. He was preparing me for it, not what I thought was coming up. I thought was coming up was sitting on the front porch, drinking coffee with my wife, do a little bit of reading, go inside at 10 o'clock, watch The Price is Right, eat some lunch, take a nap, do a little more reading, wake up in time to watch Jeopardy and The Curse of Oak Island, go to bed, do it all over again. That's not what God had in mind. And I'm okay with that. He was preparing me. I am married. My wife's name is Annette. She's the one with the kidney stone right now. She is 5 years younger than me and a lot better looking than me. But she was 11 years away from being able to retire when I did. And I told her, I said, I'm not going to sit at home and wait 11 years for you to retire. I said, if I'm going to retire, you need to retire early so we can start this next chapter in our life. And believe it or not, she didn't put up a fight. She was ready. And we knew we wanted to move north. We were the weirdos that were going to retire and move from Florida instead of moving to Florida. But there were at least four reasons, and here's 4 of them. We were tired of hurricanes. We were tired of fire ants. Anybody ever experienced a fire ant? They are the spawn of Satan. They are red, and they curl their whole body up when they bite you and you swell up. Love bugs, anybody heard of them? Yeah, they're little soft-shell beetles that splat all over your car and your windshield, and if you don't wash them off, they stink in the first place. If you don't wash them off, they eat the finish off your car. And the last thing would be tourists. Between the old folks that did retire and moved to Florida, that are already challenged in their driving skills, and then the people that would fly into Orlando International Airport, and the only thing they've ever driven is a herd of cattle, and they hand them the keys to a Suburban or a Expedition, and the next thing you know, they're playing bumper cars. They're playing bumper cars on the I-4 corridor, peak traffic hour, and we were ready to get away from that. So we had Tennessee on our radar because Tennessee is one of the 12 states that doesn't have a state income tax on your pension. So we were looking at Tennessee, and I was going to counseling at our church, and I had mentioned to my counselor that we were looking at moving to possibly Cleveland, Tennessee. And him and his twin brother were circuit preachers out of Nashville that used to go to Crossville to preach. And he said, you need to check out Crossville, Tennessee. It's a beautiful place. He goes, there's another little town just west of Crossville. It starts with a C. I can't remember what it is. It's Cookville, the other town. So I went home with that information to my wife, and her being in law enforcement, she put on her detective hat and started looking at Crossville, Tennessee. And one of her searches in Google was churches in Crossville, because we knew we wanted to get plugged in somewhere. We weren't just going to retire and not be a part of a growing church. And she plugged in churches in Crossville, and up popped a little window of a guy doing a sermon. And that guy's name was Josh Tex Cardwell. And I thought, well, cool, maybe he's a cowboy. He's not a cowboy, and he's not from Texas, but he does own a pair of cowboy boots, right?
No,
Yes,
no,
he
6
does.
months.
But we listened to his sermon, and my wife liked the fact that there were y'alls and yeah buddies in the sermon. I can't remember what the topic was, but the thing that caught our eye the most, and this is weird, it wouldn't be what you thought was attracted us. It was the simplicity of the set behind Josh. It was a bunch of old pallets standing on end with white Christmas lights strung in between the pallets. And the church we went to in Florida, they had 3 people on the design team for the stage. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it was like everything was perfect, you know? And we saw that. And honestly, we might not be in Crossville if it weren't for those pallets and those lights, because that's what gave us the inspiration to check out Revolution Church.
Here I thought it was a preaching the whole time.
Yeah.
Man, missing it.
Sorry, John.
So I started communicating.
Can't even remember the subject.
Okay, it's tight, Jeff.
He was wearing skinny jeans. But, so we made plans to come to the area and check out the area. October of 2015, and this was before either one of us were retired. And we came to the area, went to the service on Saturday night at the mall. They hadn't been at the mall long. It was the week of fall break, so attendance was way down, but we didn't even notice that. We found out later that, you know, there were usually more people there. We got up the next morning on Sunday morning and went to the service at the theater, where they were having 2 Sunday morning services. And after that service, we had met some people and just introduced ourselves. After that service, we went out to the car, and we were sitting there. I was holding my wife's hand, and I said, "What do you think?" And she looked at me with tears in her eyes, and she said, "We just found our home."
Wow.
And you can take my man card away if you want, but even now I can feel that emotion, that knowing that God, we didn't have to go through the process of visiting 15 other churches to decide where God wanted us. God had saw fit to just take us right where he wanted us to be. And to know that was a very overwhelming feeling. So we bought a house in March of 2016. We came back up, purchased a house. In the meantime, we'd retired, both of us. And when we were on that trip to buy the house, we were able to eat lunch with Josh and Brooke. And we just wanted to kind of give them our story, where we were coming from. And we had been in groups in Florida. We were part of a group. And then we felt God wanted us to launch our own group. And funny story about that, it was going to be on a Sunday night at 6 o'clock. And Friday afternoon, while we were both at work, someone kicked in our front door and vandalized our home.
Wow.
So Sunday night, a brand new group of people coming. They're greeted by a temporary plywood door, crime scene tape, and fingerprint dust everywhere. And I'm sure they were thinking in their head, what are we getting ourselves into here? But you know what? God took those 7 other couples, and we walked life together, and they're lifelong friends. One of them could walk through that door right now and it'd be like we didn't miss a beat. God just made a family of us. And we had come and had lunch with Josh and Brooke and talked to them about groups. And they said, well, we've attempted groups on a couple of occasions and they just didn't catch on. And it wasn't that they were doing anything wrong, it just wasn't God's timing yet for the church. And we were okay with that because we knew we were where God wanted us to be. And we might not be where we thought our passion was, but in hindsight, looking back, God put us on hold for a while so that we would understand what Rev Church is all about. Because people come in, I had a couple come to me 9 months ago, and they're like, we just moved to the area, we have experience with groups, we'd like to launch a group. And I put them on hold for a while. Because if they would have launched a group at that point, all they would have known is what they knew from before. It took time for them to be at Rev Church, to understand what our culture is about, to understand how we do things. And now, this last 2 weeks ago, I introduced them to my Rev Group coaches to start talking to them about going through the leadership to be a group leader. People that come in and want to do this and this and this and this and this should be a red flag to you. Because so many times you look at those people and in 3 to 4 weeks they're burnt out and they're gone. Yeah. And you don't see them. So take time to make sure people understand who you are before you put them in places of importance in your body. So we auditioned for the worship team. We were able to start serving with Brooke on the worship team on Saturday nights. I got to work in the nursery. I love babies. One thing I love about babies is they can't talk back to you. You get up in the ages and they start smashing you, that's when I'm going to jail. So I was able to work in the nursery, and we were just rolling with it. And we were content to be where God had us. We weren't upset that groups weren't going, because we knew that God had it. In the early part of 2017, we were approached and asked if we could coordinate and launch groups after Easter in 2017. And we didn't really know that many people at the church at that point. We thought we'd be leading a group, not coordinating groups, and we weren't on staff. So we prayed about it, but with all those things in mind, naturally our answer was yes, we'll do it. And one thing that you have to have groups as leaders. And I honestly didn't even know who to ask to be leaders. So Josh put out a sign-up sheet for people that were interested in possibly leading a group. And we probably had 8 couples and a few single people respond. He did the training. It was on a Monday night for 4 weeks, about an hour to an hour and a half each night. In the meantime, Annette and I were praying about how we would do this, because we honestly did not know where to even start. We're in a new area. We didn't know people. And that's a good place to be, because it keeps you on your knees, and you have to seek God. We went to the visitor center in Crossville. We got a map of Cumberland County. We still have that map somewhere at church. We divided the county into 6 geographical areas and gave each one of those areas a number. And we got the word out that we're going to be launching groups. Every week we'd be pumping it up on the announcements, on slides. And we didn't have sign-ups. We just asked people show up on the night we're going to launch groups. And we assigned a leader to each one of those 6 groups. And the first night, people started coming. And when they'd walk in the door, they'd go to the map on an easel. They would say, okay, I live here, I'm in group 1. They would go to the corresponding number. We had the sanctuary set up in circles of 10, 6 different circles with numbers on them. They would go to that area. That night we had one group that didn't get anybody in the area. They were our Deer Lodge group. I'm still not sure if Deer Lodge is even in the United States. It's somewhere way out there. They didn't have anybody in their group, but the other 5 groups, it was amazing how God worked it out, because within 1 or 2 people, each one of those circles had the same amount of people in them. And the format we used took the sermon that Josh had preached the previous day, edited videos out of it, 2 to 2.5 minute videos, and had corresponding questions for those videos. So we set all the circles up to where everybody in the sanctuary could see a TV. And then we'd play the video, and the questions would come up, the groups would discuss them. And we still do that today for our Rev groups, the groups that meet in homes, and it does a number of things for us. It keeps the sermon fresh on people's minds. So they're talking about what Josh has just said from the pulpit. Number 2, it lets discussion happen where they can dig in deeper to topics and discuss it. And number 3, there's no doctrinal problems. We don't have to worry about a different doctrine. It's coming straight from the pulpit. And it has worked well for our small groups that meet in homes. And we met for 4 weeks, and we were intentional about doing it at church because we wanted people to get to know their leaders and leaders to get to know their people for the first 4 weeks, and then we transitioned into the leaders' homes.
Neutral location.
Yeah, and it was a location they were familiar with already. They'd been to church, and it took away that awkwardness of showing up at somebody's door and ringing their doorbell and saying, I'm here for group. They already knew each other after that 4 weeks, and the transition from the church to the homes was seamless. It wasn't awkward at all. And that session lasted for 6 weeks, from Easter till Memorial Day of 2017. And then we broke for the summer. In the summer of 2017, I was asked to come on staff. At this point, I'd just been a volunteer. I was asked to come on staff, and I don't know if Josh and Brooke remember this. It was them and one other person, I believe, in the interview. And I took my wife, because when you hire a staff member, you're hiring the couple. The spouse needs to understand what their spouse is getting into. So I took my wife, and we were sitting there, and they said, "You got any questions?" And I said, "Yeah. What do I have to give up to be on staff at Rev Church?" And without missing a beat, both Josh and Brooke said everything. And before I could say, "No, really," I could tell by their tone and the looks on their face, they were dead serious. And in working with them over these last couple of years, they have. Not that they've abandoned everything else, but they give everything. They've surrendered everything to God. They make their life decisions based on that calling that God has on them for their life to be at Rev Church. And everything that they do in their life is based on the vision that God put in their hearts. That's why it makes it so easy to work for them. And at one point in the process of the interview, I actually said this out loud. Thinking back, it probably wasn't the best decision, but I told them, I said, I'm really hoping that you say no, because I don't know that I'm ready to give up everything. I had this sense of entitlement that I'd busted my butt at UPS for 30 years. I deserved to be able to rest. And, well, not unfortunately, but the answer wasn't no.
All depends on what day it is.
Yeah.
Who you asking?
Yeah. And it was funny, because after I started working at the church, my friends from Florida, especially the ones that worked at UPS, said, "Dude, if you were going to continue to work, why didn't you just stay at UPS? You'd be making a lot better money. You'd be working towards your retirement, making more money in retirement." And the only thing I knew to tell them was that UPS was my job. Being at Rev is my calling. When you're working a job, you're constantly looking out in the distance like, what's out there that's better? I could be making more money. I could have less stress in my life. But when you're living out your calling that God has on your life, even in the craziness of dealing with crazy people, God provides calm. And there's contentment.
Wait, is that the definition of life group leaders? Craziness of dealing with crazy people?
Yeah, that's one of the qualifications. They have to meet that qualification. But like I said before, God was preparing me for where He was taking me. And I'd like to think that it took God 30 years to prepare me, because He knew all the challenges I would face with those crazy people, and all of the difficult times that I would face. But truth be told, I think it's just because I'm a slow learner. It took 30 years just to teach me the basics, so that the first week on staff I wouldn't throat punch somebody or body slam somebody. But anyway, that's where I came from. In the fall of 2017, we were preparing for our second launch. And by this time, we had our groups up on a place called Planning Center, where we could display all of our groups. And as we trained new leaders, which I did the training the second time through, it's all part of the I Do, You Watch. And then the second time through, took the training for the leaders. And we launched 4 more groups that fall. And people would go online and sign up to be in those groups. Same thing at the sanctuary. We met the first 4 weeks. Videos, questions, transition to the home. So now we had a total of 10 groups and about 80 people in groups. And we rolled on with that all the way through the spring of 2018. In the summer of 2018, Josh and I met in our green room, which sounds really funny and fancy, but Steve's seen it. All it is a couch and a chair right off the side of the stage. That's our green room. Josh and I are both colorblind, so we had a hard time finding it. But we sat down at the green room because we knew that we kind of reached a plateau as far as what we were going to be able to do with groups that were meeting in homes. And we knew we had to start thinking outside of the box. And we had so many new believers that weren't churched all their life. They didn't understand the concept of discipleship and meeting in somebody's home. And out of that meeting that day was the birth of our Connect groups. And Connect groups are totally different than our Rev groups, which are home groups. They are interest and hobby-based groups. They're 'Connect groups are like 80% relationship, 20% discipleship. Our Rev groups that meet in homes are pretty much the flip of that. It's 80% discipleship, 20% relationships. And we found things that people were passionate about, that they were already doing in their life, and found somebody to connect them to, so that they were already doing something they were passionate about, but they had that in common. And we did groups, Ultimate Frisbee, we have a sewing group, we have a cornhole group, beginner guitar, walking groups, crafting, small business leaders. We do line dancing in our church.
Wow.
It's amazing. What's that?
Oh, we got the boots?
Yeah, that's why I got the boots. CrossFit, softball, self-defense, and many more. But like I said, we took the things that people were already doing and passionate about, and that passion was the initial glue to keep that group together. They were meeting about something that they were already passionate about. And all of a sudden, we had blown up from just under 100 people to over 250 people in groups. And we'd gone from 10 groups to 20, 24 groups. And one of the things, and it's still an ongoing process, we're constantly adding groups, but we had to look at how we were going to measure success in our groups. And it took us a while to land on this one, and I think we're just now landing on it.
We got the language right.
Yeah, we got the language right, and we're implementing it. But by tracking attendance and looking at trends, any given group on any given day typically gets about 60% of the people that are signed up for the group to attend it. So if you got 10 people signed up, you're going to get 6. 20 people signed up, typically you'll have 12.
And also, if they go to group that week, they're probably not coming to church.
Yeah,
Just so you know.
yeah.
They give you they give you about an hour. They give you one thing a week, most people. So, sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. Brandon over here does our Ultimate Frisbee group. He is our student director, I guess would be your title. Is that what's on your paycheck? But 25 years old, a transplant from Georgia. Even though he is a Georgia Bulldogs fan, God is using him in volunteer country. God is doing great things with our youth group. And if you've seen us on social media, we've been repainting the inside of our sanctuary because Brandon preached the paint off the walls just a few weeks ago. God is using him mightily. But he leads up our Ultimate Frisbee group. And it was coming up on the day of your very first meeting, about a half hour from when they were going to meet by the fairgrounds. And I can't remember if you texted me or called me. Texted me. He said, dude, everybody's bailing on me. We're not even going to have enough people to play. And one thing that God had spoke to my heart early on when I started working with groups was that our responsibility was to be faithful to the faithful and not punish the faithful because there were people that weren't. And I spoke that into Brandon, and he went. Can you explain what happened that day?
Yeah, we got there, and there was only about 3 of us, which I expected. We can't play 3, but we got there, and there was another group that was playing Ultimate Frisbee, which is like the craziest thing in Crossville, that somebody else is playing Ultimate Frisbee, and we got together with them, and we had a great game, and we were able to kind of share the gospel with some people, so it was really cool.
Yeah, and it's amazing what God does when we're faithful.
How many do you have now? Like 10 a week? Every time you do it?
Yeah, like 10 to 15.
Yeah. A year later?
Yeah. Yeah. So my other key point that I want to bring out this morning is that because it's a challenge, people get discouraged because, man, I only had 3 people show up out of, sometimes it's out of 15, depending on what's going on in people's lives. And it's easy to get discouraged by looking at those numbers. But here's what we've decided on, and it's going to be our marching cadence, is that we can't keep people committed, but we can keep people connected. And here's what I mean by that. Take Steve, for example. Steve is into classic cars. What kind of car do you have?
Camaro.
A Camaro, a 1969 Camaro, the car everybody wants. Steve's into classic cars. He has a passion for it. And we build a group around Steve's passion for that classic car, and he has 20 people sign up to be a part of his group. It's coming to the day where they're all gonna get together and they're gonna talk about their cars, and 12 people show up. And Steve puts all of his energy and effort into those 12 people that came to group. Well, what about the 8 that didn't? What we're teaching our leaders is to make contact with those 8 people. Let them know that you missed them. Let them know when the next event's coming up. You hope they can make it. Is there anything I can pray for you about? Is there something going on in your life? Because people sign up for a group for a reason. They know there's a need to be part of something bigger. But the enemy doesn't stop trying to discourage and destroy and distract. So Steve follows up with those 8 people, and there's 3 of them that don't make the next one. He follows up with them. So what happens the next time those people come to church and see Steve? They don't feel like they have to apologize for missing the group. They don't feel like they have to explain why they weren't there. There's not that awkwardness. And because those are the people that slide out the back door and you never see them again because they feel like they've let you down. But when our leaders are connecting with the people and putting time and effort into them, even though they can't make it, if somebody never made one group, they need to know that they're still important. And we connect with them.
Can I interject?
Sure.
Just to put it in a way that I think pastors would understand, like, you need to tell your group leaders, you're their shepherding pastor, essentially. Like, somebody comes to you and says, for us, this is what we found for us. Somebody comes to you and says, man, I only had 3 people in my group. Man, we are so sorry that we taught you that the goal for your group was to teach people the Bible. This is for us. We're so sorry that we taught you success for your group is having a bunch of people show up one day a week to go through the book of Leviticus. What we need you to do is take the people that are in your group and make sure you're texting them every week. That's success for your group. Success for your group is not them showing up to your group. Number 1, success for your group is staying connected to them. Does that make sense to everybody? Because what to Jeff's point, they're gone, man. You know how people are. If they go 4 weeks, 8 weeks without somebody from the church calling them, what do they say? They don't even care about me. I guess I didn't even matter. Nobody even texted me. Nobody even called me. And so, if that makes sense. So, sorry.
No, it's fine. And to backtrack a little bit, the responsibility in connect groups is to open and close with prayer and to have a short devotional in the middle, just to plant seed. It's something that we have 2 books at our church now, devotionals that were written by church and church staff. Josh does most of them, but they can just pull a devotional out of that book and read it and share it with the group. It's easy, it's not confrontational, they don't have to be Bible scholars or do a bunch of homework. They just open and close with prayer. So the challenge I had moving from a few months ago into the future was we broke that 400 barrier and 32 groups, and it's growing. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a real problem with letting things go. I think it would be termed as control freak, because I don't trust anybody else to do it the way that I would necessarily do it. But here's the wall that I hit was you either give stuff away or group stops growing. It was that plain and simple. So I knew that I had to give some stuff away. And I found 2 couples in the church that are solid couples. Put one of them in charge of Rev groups and one of them in charge of Connect groups. And what they do is they are the point of contact for all the leaders in those 2 areas. They'll visit each group every session we have, fall and spring. They will help leaders through conflict if there is any. And just in the beginning phases of this process, my goal is to mentor them. I want them to shadow me on a Sunday morning so they can see how I engage with people and work groups in every conversation I have with anybody I meet on a Sunday morning. I want what God has put on me to rub off on them so that they can duplicate, because bottom line is I'm probably not going to live another 50 years. I started working at a church when I was 57, like most of you guys. But if something happened to me, I want to know that what I'm doing goes on. And not because of me, because the church needs it. So I have to look at what areas, if something happened to me on the way home today, what wouldn't be covered? And I have to mentor people to be able to step into those positions. And these two couples, eventually, they'll be the ones that find leaders and train them for groups. And it's the only way that it's going to continue to grow, because I can't do it all. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because you feel like you're invincible and you can handle anything, but something's going to suffer. So if I could tell you anything this morning to encourage you, is that God has a plan. Whether you have 15 people or 500, God has a plan, and starting groups, the relationships that grow in groups are cement that hold the core of the church together. When you walk out in our lobby now, people are hanging around for a half hour after service talking, and it's like all these little families that are connecting. People are excited about coming to church because, hey, I get to see my group. I get to see my family. Every full-time member of staff that we have at Rev Church is leading a group, and that buys them into the process to where they understand the importance of groups too. So basically, don't lose hope. If you don't have somebody to head up groups, pray about it and ask God to send somebody. There's people on our staff from California, Florida, Georgia, Ohio, I forget where else. We only have one that's actually from, or two that are from Crossville, right, Brandy? You grew up? No. Where are you from?
Indiana.
Indiana, okay. Well, Jackie then, she's our freak on staff. She actually grew up in Crossville. But God can do it. God will put it together. And if you find somebody that's willing to do it and step into it, not being on staff, that's willing to invest their time and energy into it, you know that their heart is there. They're not doing it for a paycheck. And honestly, there's nobody at Rev Church that's getting rich. We don't drive Bentleys or go out sailing on the yacht on the weekend. We live within our means and see what God's going to do. And it's a simple
Can I
lifestyle.
piggyback on what you
Go ahead.
said? Let me give you guys a couple of things that I've done. I'm not saying you got to do them, but for us, what worked is you got to support it from the platform and the pulpit. And so, like for me, I had to figure out the language that I was going to use. I didn't have to give the details from the pulpit. Like I had to figure out, how am I going to explain this over? And I think as pastors, sometimes we get guilty, especially in groups, of going to a conference or reading a new book, and we're going to do it this way now. 3 months later, you read a new book, we're going to do it this way now because that didn't work good. I think one thing Geoff is communicating is stick with it, because not all the groups made it, right?
Right.
Right.
We're in a totally different place now than we were when we started.
Yeah,
Out of those original 6 groups, there's only one still going.
But you got to know where groups fits in your vision. And so for us, what we found was, this is how we communicate it over the exact same way we communicate it every time. I did it this past weekend at announcements, but we want people to meet Jesus and get saved, and then we want people to find freedom and be healed of their yesterdays and settle their yesterdays. And then we want people to figure their purpose out and make a difference. What we were doing, and I think church plants, it's really easy to do this, is when somebody gets saved, we were throwing them right into serving, because it was like, we got to have bodies and kids, and we got to have somebody in the nursery. Where the missing link for us was, that we found, was people weren't settling their yesterdays. They weren't finding freedom. They weren't. The book of James says that when we confess our sins one to another, that's where we find healing. You get saved when you ask for forgiveness from God, but you get healed when you confess your sins one to another, and that's groups. And so prayer of a righteous person leads to healing, right? And so what we found was, I had to explain that to the church in a way that they understood. Here's the value of this. Where are you at? Did you just get saved? Have you been saved for years, but you've never found freedom? You're not ready to serve. You got to get in the group. And so I had to figure that out, because if you don't do it from the pulpit and the platform, and I mean really figure out an effective way to communicate it, and that's our job, right? It's never going to fly. Nothing in the church is ever going to fly if you don't do that. And so that would be mine. And just know who you are, man. We had an easel with a map we got from the visitor center when we started it two and a half years ago. So don't try to be Life Church if you're not like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm guilty of that. We're trying to be something we're not. So just know where you're at and who you are, and celebrate it, in groups. So
I'm going to share something that you said, Josh. I'm a member of First Baptist Church, Hendersonville. We have 3,000 members. And about 6 months ago, our senior pastor stood up in all 4 services and said, if you have to choose between coming to here on Sunday morning or being a part of a group with your 1 hour a week, we want you to go to a group. And he said he took a lot of flack from some of the staff members, you know, who do youth ministry, college ministry, worship ministry and everything. But he says, if people don't connect with anybody else, we're not gonna have 3,000 members. We're gonna have 3,000 members on a roll. And that was it. And when he said that, it just changed the whole atmosphere of the church. We have more people now joining connect groups. We call ours connect groups than any time in the history of the church.
They're gone. They don't get connected, they're gone, y'all. We went through a big exodus at year 3 of our church plant because we grew so fast and nobody got connected. And that was the weakness in growing fast, is we didn't have the systems in place and the groups in place. And we figured out like what Steve said, he could see it when he came. So, you know, it's like, people don't know each other.
Well, statistics show if you don't have 7 relationships in the church, you're not going to stay.
Yeah.
And one thing we found out, and I'll say this in closing, is that we're not fishing in a pond. My grandparents used to have a pond, and my sister and I used to gather grasshoppers and throw them in the pond and find out where the fish were, and we'd put one on the hook and catch fish. And I love that this place is called the river. We're in a river. It's constantly changing. The culture around us is constantly changing. And one thing about a river is you can't stand on the bank and throw your line in, because eventually it just ends up down river from you in the weeds. You have to be in it. You have to be in it. And the difficulty of being in it is that cultural current is constantly pushing against you. But we found this out in our groups, and I don't think it's uniquely for us that we have to go to the fish. We have to go to a place where we can actually put the bait in front of the fish and have it accessible to them, which means fighting the current. None of this is easy. If you're looking for an easy way, you're in the wrong profession, because most of you have been in ministry long enough to know that it's a challenge. It's a very rewarding challenge, but we have to fight against that cultural current because it's trying to sweep all the fish away. And if we're not out there in it, we will miss the boat, no pun intended. So I just wanted to share that with you. And thanks for having me this morning, y'all. Any questions for Josh or myself? I'll try to answer them. If there's any complaints, send those to Brandon. He answers all of our complaints.
Did the Connect groups go 6 weeks also? I mean, basically speaking, 6 to 8 weeks?
A lot of that depends on what they are. Like Brandon's Ultimate Frisbee group, they don't break for the summer, because to play Ultimate Frisbee, they need those spring, summer, and early fall months. So we kind of leave that up. We have some groups that meet year-round. But the thing we found with our Connect groups, some of them only meet once a month. Some of them meet every other week. But we found that in trending them, people will come to a once-a-month event more than they will come to an every other week, because they know if they miss one, 2 weeks there's another one. If they miss one that's once a month, they have to wait a whole nother month to have the opportunity to be with their family, and people show up. Numbers trend better in Connect groups than they do in Rev groups that meet every week.
Did you say that every one of your groups are doing sermon-based small groups?
Just the ones that meet in homes, the Rev groups. We have 2 different categories, Rev groups and Connect groups.
Connect groups are using our books that we wrote.
Yeah, but all of the ones that meet in homes that are your
Connect groups are the
hobby-based.
hobby-based groups.
I think affinity groups is sometimes what they're referred to.
Yeah, but the ones that are actually your traditional style home group, all of them.
They do
use the
video too?
sermon-based.
They edited down video? Someone's done that?
I edit the videos on Sunday afternoon. By Sunday night, I'll have the videos and the questions emailed to all the leaders.
Wow.
You're Jeffrey on the spot.
That's why I say, like, God will send you, like, he's awesome, y'all. Like,
That's great.
Is there a different training for Connect groups than the typical home groups?
Yes. And we have written our own curriculum for the training for Rev groups and Connect groups.
Can you share that with us?
I'll be glad to share any of that. I've got it on my zip drive at home. If you provide me an email address, I'll email it to you. Connect groups are quite as in-depth as somebody that's gonna lead a home group, because there's a lot more opportunity for things to come up in a Rev group than a Connect group. We handle conflict and everything the same way, and we have the same guidelines for both groups. You know, like what's said in group stays in group, no alcohol if it's got Rev attached to it. We have 10 guidelines that everybody gets a copy of when they join a group.
Yeah.
But I can share any of that with any of you. We're not here to be uniquely us. We want to be able to help anybody we can.
What are the metrics that you use? Maybe, I think typically for us to measure our success, is there a metric that you have that says, okay, this is how I know that our group's ministry, our community here is being successful, both tangible, and are there some that are a little more intangible that you're looking for as well to measure success?
I can answer that.
Go ahead.
How many leaders we're developing and how many coaches he's developing. I think what we've done is we've looked at not attendance of groups. You guys know this is basic. You only grow if you have more leaders, not if you have more people coming. Like I just said, we had a bunch of people coming, but a bunch of them left because we didn't have the leaders to take care of them. So like, I think for me, being the pastor, I know the groups ministry is doing better because Geoff just promoted, is that a weird word? 2 people into coaching position. And he's got 6 more leaders on the back burner that are ready to start new groups next semester. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's not, 471 sounds good, but really the number that we're really honing in on is, how many leaders do you have? 39 leaders, so we want that to be at 45 next year. We want to have, instead of 2 coaches, we want 4 coaches.
So you kind
Attendance
of
is great, just like on Sundays, attendance is great, but if you're not taking care of the leaders and the volunteers, you can't take care of the people that are coming.
So you kind of have like a hierarchy within the realm of leadership in the small groups.
I mean,
Coaches,
it's
leaders.
biblical, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Sure.
Moses had the ones that, you know, should lead so many and so many and so many, and so. But we've just kind of gotten to where we communicate. We're just now doing this as a staff. We're drawing circles on a board, and in every ministry that applies. And so our focus is equipping the saints because we're the staff, not most churches. I'm sorry. For us, where we've landed is most churches spend all their time and resources in taking care of the community and the attenders. We're kind of flipping that script because we believe biblically for us, nothing wrong with that. We need to take care of our volunteers and our leaders. So if we're increasing volunteers and increasing leaders, the other's going to grow. You know what I mean? Everybody had a big Sunday at Easter. They didn't keep them. You know what I mean? Like, so that's kind of how we're measuring it across the board. So, is that safe to say, Jeff?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how does your communication process, because you can't be at every group, right?
Right.
So you must have regular meetings with your coaches, I would assume.
Yes.
Right? And how do you guys identify then, you know, if you've read small group books, the gurus will all tell you, and I believe this to be true, that small groups are leadership factories, right? You can definitely find leadership potential and you find leadership people in small groups than you will in a larger congregation on any given Sunday.
Right.
Because they'll just shine, they'll start to rise to the top.
Rises.
So how do you, what do you use to measure that? And how do you coach your leaders? You may not be able to answer this in a 30-second snippet, but how do you coach your leaders to recognize that so that you get a chance to say, okay, I want to meet with this person, or I want the pastor to meet with this person and get them into a faster track or a more in-depth leadership training?
Good question. And what I've done for my coaches, and I'm starting to implement this now, we're kind of in a weird season because we're between our spring session and our fall session, which gives me a great opportunity to train them in this, but I have a form that they fill out whenever they visit a group. It just has like how many people were there, who wasn't there, any problems. Before they go to the group, they get with the group leader and say, okay, I need to know when I come, who are you apprenticing as a leader? And our whole system is based on the I do you watch, right? The exponential. I do you watch, you know, I do you help. you do I watch, you do I go somewhere else. And that's in their training that they go through as leaders, that they're constantly looking for apprentice. And we have one group right now that has the potential of 3 couples that are in that group to split off and be on their own. So that's what we use to try, and it's pounding that in their head and not letting it just sit on the back burner. I need the name of somebody that you're apprenticing. Because when they have to put it down on paper, it becomes real. You know, and it makes them really think and pray about, all right, who's in my group that God's showing me can duplicate what we're doing here. Does that make sense?
Yes, sure does.
Okay.
Piggyback on that too, it's kind of like they're self-driven groups. We don't show specialization to any of them or anything, and so a lot of them crash and burn, man.
And we have to be all right with that.
We got people that you look on the outside and you go, man, they know everybody, they're gonna have a great group, that they don't understand. Success for a group is not how many people you get to come. That's the key. It's you taking care of the people. What you do Monday through Saturday or whenever the group is, you know, that's success to us. It's not, does that make sense?
Sure.
So it's a different line of thinking from the way I grew up in church, which was, who all's coming?
Yeah.
We need more people here. No. That's not, that's great. Yeah, that's important. We want them to be there. But really, number one is closing the back door. That's what we're talking about, closing the back door. It's shutting it down. So at some point, you gotta let them sink or swim. Broom's either gonna sweep or it's not. If it don't sweep, it don't sweep, you know?
With a lot of these contexts that are smaller than where you guys are now, what do you what are your leadership qualifications to finding your host or whatever?
It's a good
How are you
question.
identifying those?
Yeah, actually, something we talked about at staff yesterday, that
Fine-tune them.
we're gonna fine-tune our policies and procedures. They have to be, and we don't have membership in church, so they have to be a committed person that's coming to the church regularly. It's important to us that they actually are steward. They believe in stewardship, and they're planting into the church. I'm not exactly sure how we're gonna implement that, but we even talked yesterday about we need to have in writing who we will accept as a leader, because it's just a matter of time before all of us face the fact that there's somebody with an alternative lifestyle that wants to be a leader. And how do we handle that? If we put it in writing now in our policies and procedures, we can show them August of 2019, we put this in our policies and procedures. We're not picking on you. It's just where we stand as a church, because it's coming. It'll probably affect all of
Or
us.
you just send them ultimate frisbee.
True. Brandon's group will take anybody.
We tell them they gotta be able to, not even that they need to believe, we may fine tune this in the future, this may be a train wreck. But like, they gotta teach within our statement of beliefs. And they've gotta believe the big things, but like, what's a good example?
Reformed theology.
Yeah, Reformed theology. Somebody could be a Calvinist, and we'd probably let them lead a group, but we gotta be like, don't be teaching the tulip road. You know, we love you. You know, Pentecostal, you know, don't be taking new believers and talking about your Yamaha. You know what I mean? Like, we've got to, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not down, I'm just saying, like, it's cool if you do that, but that's not the goal of this.
Do you think you'll ever go to where people can choose their own curriculum?
We have people, but I've got, you want to answer that about how?
I didn't hear the question.
Do you think you'll ever go where people don't?
We actually have
men and women's groups.
Right, we have a women's group, actually 2 women's groups that meet, and they do a lot of the Women of Faith curriculum. Any curriculum that's going to be taught, though, has to be approved by the elders. So there's that
I have a specific
accountability.
elder that reads the book or goes through the curriculum.
Just to check for doctrinal, make sure that everything is lined up doctrinally. So we do have that. It's just easier, and my Rev group leaders tell me all the time how much they appreciate the videos and the questions, because it cuts down their prep time, because they're busy just like everybody else. They're working 50 to 60
That's
hours a
probably
week.
what caused you to be able to have so many leaders so quick too, right? I mean, that's the thing that we're having trouble with. People just don't feel like they even have time or the
Let me tell you what
ability.
people don't want. People don't want people over at their house.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, that's our culture, y'all. We just have the staff over. I mean, some churches are built on that, and that's great. For us, again, I say for us, for our church, man,
Well, that's kind of what I was going to ask Lewis too. Like, is there any merit, Lewis, to potentially churches going back a little bit, and don't string me up for this, but going back to the Sunday school model in the sense that people are already at a facility? Because with people's busyness in their schedule these days,
Just don't call it Sunday school. Most of our Connect groups are on campus on Sunday mornings. And we call it Connect group, we don't call it Sunday school, because for some odd reason, people just, that word Sunday school either brings back bad memories or boring memories.
Yeah, it's been stale.
A lot of the guys are going that because you've got them there.
you can still build that community.
And, yeah, and most people, like you said, don't want anybody in their house. Now, what our Connect group started doing, we do a little dining out thing where every other month, three different families get together. We have the choice, go to a home, go somewhere, or go like a picnic where we make the choice. Because I'll be honest with you, I travel on the road a lot. My wife works 2 jobs. I don't want anybody in my house in the evening. I'm gonna turn my schnauzer on you if you come to my house.
The biggest issue we would have with that is we don't have the space.
Yeah.
Where you got a lot of church planners are using every bit of square. Most church planners don't even have an office.
Building I'm in was built for small groups.
Yeah, I mean, so it's like Sunday school. I think that'll come back around actually, for the reasons you say. But the biggest issue for young church plants like ours is, I just got an office a year ago. You know, it's the first time ever. I mean, so
Something else that I've seen a lot of is third spaces. Hey, we're gonna meet at such and such coffee shop, or we're gonna meet, and that's less threatening. And they plan it, we're gonna do it at 6:30 when everybody's on their commute home. And that seems to be working. But once you get the space, one thing I've noticed watching planners that finally get space and doing small groups on site, you gotta do what y'all are doing.
Right.
You gotta make it quality, or people are just not gonna come back.
It's not like we're the golden children and we haven't done anything that didn't work. We've learned a lot of things.
Works for us right now.
Right. And we've learned a lot of those things the hard way. If Brandon had a group that met at his home instead of on a field by the fairgrounds, his group wouldn't be going because he's not gonna have a group over at his house all the time. But it's doing the hard work to figure out what is gonna work in your
I think
community.
that's the important part about knowing the culture, right?
Right.
Knowing the people. We do sermon-based core groups at our church. And so the pastor does a study guide on Wednesday, goes out every Wednesday morning and goes to all the leaders and anybody in the church that wants to get it so that they're prepared for the Sunday service. So yours is post, right? Ours is pre, right?
Yeah.
So those questions come out pre. But back to the Sunday school model, the people that are in our church right now, we have like 120, 150 people. The people that have been going to church for a while treat that, we call it core groups. We don't call it Sunday school. And that curriculum is the study guide. That's what we do. And we break down the sermon and after the sermon's done. But the people that have been going to church for a while treat it like that's Sunday school. They'll even call it that. Right? New people that are coming in, they call it core groups, but there's still a hurdle there because there's where you have probably the goal if your discipleship strategy to connect people and get them connected and have a discipleship strategies, you want 110 or 125% of people in your groups that versus your attendance, right? That would be a model that some have preached and taught. But ours is not that, it's reverse of that. It's like 30%, 40% that will stay after service because they give us that hour for service. And then the next hour for core groups is really the people that really just interested in growing. The other attenders, they're gone, right? And so we're missing 60, 70% of the people after church is over. When they're gone, they're gone. And I think, I guess the one question I have for you guys and for the group is it's a little challenging for me to think about if they don't come to church, or you give them the most important hour you can spend is in the group, not right. So that challenges my mind and challenges my thinking because I really want people to come to church. But what are churches doing now, or what do you guys think about the future from a church planning perspective about challenging people to give you the second hour. Is there a way to do it? Are all attempts failing and this is where we're at as a culture, as a people, America is here? I'm just interested. I don't have an answer. I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts.
It's gotta have value. I'm gonna confess something. I hated Sunday school and I hated small groups. Because one of two things happened. One, oh, Lewis, you're a minister. You can answer all the questions. Well, I wanna go sit with my wife and be in a small group. Or two, I was bored out of my skull. This is the first time in 30-something years of ministry, I'm actually part of a small group, and I like it. Why? It's done with quality. It connects with me. There are people, I'm actually the oldest one in the room in that group. But they connect. We're all in kind of in the same place of life. And I'm willing to give that extra hour now because there is a connection with people, and I can be Lewis. There's kind of the openness of freedom to do it. That's my opinion. I think that's where people are going to say, I have value in this, I have freedom in this, so I'll give you my extra hour. If you don't, you know, I'll come on Sunday morning, give you my tithe, sit there, and be gone.
So for us, there's two distinctions in Crossville. You have highly churched people and you have lost people. And everything we do is built around trying to get lost people into discipleship. Church people are the ones that are mostly in our home groups that meet every single week. Church people go to Sunday school. Church people come to the visitation on Tuesday. Church people will be there 5 days a week. It can suck. I'm sorry. It's lame. I didn't mean to offend anybody to say it. It can be lame. It can be horrible. You can preach a terrible sermon. The church people are going to stand up at the end and go, "That was great, honey." But we do everything based around lost people. And so I think it just takes a lot of patience. And so for us, why small groups was the missing link for us is because if we didn't get them connected, they were gone anyway. I know that sounds harsh, but it's like, if they're not doing something where they're connecting to people, I had to get to a place where I had to break as the preacher and go, okay, do I want people to go to a group once or twice a month and have a chance at them coming to church a year from now, every week, and getting involved and all that stuff? Or do I want them to sit and hear me preach for 2 months and then kind of get bored? Because nobody remembers what we preach, y'all. I hate to burst y'all's bubble.
Yeah, Jeff.
We all think
87%
we all
forgot it.
We all think it's all about the sermon and the preach. That's bull, man. They don't care. They don't remember. You go to people on your Easter Sunday sermon and ask them what you preached on. They can't even tell you, and it's the resurrection story every Easter. You know what I mean? Like, they don't care, and you just got to realize, like, if they don't get connected, they're gone. And so, to me, it's all about patience and longevity with lost people. You can't get frustrated in they're coming to church because they've heard that. They've heard the whole guilt stuff. To me, for our church, it's like, that's great. You came to group this week. It's all right. You missed church. Hey, man, we'll see you next week. You know, and so.
And one thing we found is instead of groups just being an internal ministry mechanism for the church, is that with the connect groups, we're actually able to use them in an evangelistic way. Jackie has a walking group. She has days where you can invite a friend. They don't even have to go to our church. Just invite somebody. Seth, who's interning with us this summer, he's got a basketball group called Ballers Only. There's, 4 guys that actually go to church out of the 15 or 20 that come? 3. But he's just not discipling them, but he's presenting the gospel in that devotion time to where that's a segue for them to understand church isn't all about perfect people that wear perfect masks. It's about guys that go out on the basketball court and they compete like crazy to win a $10 gift card to somewhere. But it's a segue for them to get to church. Connect groups is a segue. When people are in the connect groups and they keep coming to church and they keep hearing the gospel and the truth, that's a segue into getting into a Rev group where more discipleship happens. And it's just a step process to where out of that group of Rev group people, more leaders are coming to the top. Like you said, the cream comes to the top and you see who's ready. And it just keeps rolling. The thing is having the people in place to handle what's coming. So if you're going through hard times right now, rest in the peace that God is preparing you for what's coming. It might not be what you think it is, but He's preparing you.
A couple of just real quick questions. Rev group stands for what now? I understand the connect part. That like the Rev group, is that just the sermon based or also?
Groups, yeah,
It's
that
a
meet
home
every
group.
week.
But if
Or
they're doing,
traditional
I think you
small
said something
groups.
about women of faith, is that considered more the connect group? Or
Yes,
is that in the, okay,
they're more,
gotcha.
because they're a specialized group.
Gotcha, okay. Childcare, it's always a question. What do y'all do on that?
We don't have childcare. We put on our planning center page, childcare is not available for this group.
We also make people buy their book for like a
Yeah,
men's group.
if they're not invested into it, they'll skate.
So does everybody find their own individual childcare, or do people have childcare at the place?
No, there's only one group that actually provides childcare, and we call that group the zoo, because the kids outnumber.
That's mine. I got 14 kids in my small group.
They outnumber the adults. Not that it's wrong to have childcare available. We just have decided to leave it up to the leader. And most of the leaders, like if people started dragging 15 kids out to Ultimate Frisbee and they're running all over the fairgrounds, Brandon's got a problem. And it seemed to have worked. People, if they want to do it, they'll find somebody to watch their kids. And they're invested in it at that point. So it's a good
It
thing.
seems like what we found is the easier we try to make it for people, the less successful and longevity it has. It's like the more we're kind of like, we're not going to worry about childcare for you, and we're not buying your books for you, and going to have them available, and we're not. Everybody's got Amazon. Yeah, I don't know. That nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that.
Now, we did provide childcare for the first 4 weeks at the church when we
Yeah.
launched the groups. We had somebody in the nursery to watch the kids. And then it was up to the individual leaders, they moved into the homes if they were gonna provide the childcare or not. Any other questions?